Parliament wants Deputy President David Mabuza to intervene in the impasse around the SABC Board. The public broadcaster has been without a board since Saturday. This comes as the non-executive board's term ended on the day. The State Security Agency has been blamed for stalling the vetting process of candidates, which led to this delay. Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. I am Aldrin St-Pierre. Now, experts say a boardless SABC does not bode well for the broadcaster. In the absence of an oversight structure could lead to the abuse in the corporation. Tonight we ask you this question: does the outgoing SABC board have a good story to tell? Let's welcome our outgoing SABC board chairperson, Bongomusa Makhathini. We're also joined by member of the Portfolio Committee on Communications, Diane Barnard, as well as Labour Union Communications Workers Union General Secretary, Aubrey Shabalala. Remember that you can also be part of the debate by going on to our Twitter feed. All you have to do is search for @Unfiltered SABC or search for Unfiltered SABC on Facebook and be part of the conversation. So let's start off the conversation. I'm going to start off the question with Bongomusa Makhathini. Good evening. Thank you so much for making time for us. The board doesn't exist. How do you feel about that?
Good evening. Good evening to you and other participants, and greetings to South Africans. It's a sad situation for the SABC to be without a board. It's something that I hope and trust that Parliament will do everything possible to get the board appointed. It is important from a governance point of view.
Why do you say that? What are some of the risks that we run?
For proper governance, a board has a very important role that they play in guiding and supporting the executives and ensuring that, for an example, some of the items or issues that were meant to be finalized, they can support the executive team to ensure that those are done. For an example, as the outgoing board, we've made a number of publicly available submissions from a policy point of view. Those need to be engaged on and to be followed through with Parliament and with the Minister. This talks to, for example, a media levy as one of the things that we've put forward. It talks to the direct funding of the public mandate by departments like Education, Department of Health, Arts and Culture. So there's a number of things that the board can really help the executive team working with the shareholder representative to ensure that those are done.
Okay. Diane, good evening. Welcome to the show as well. What happened? Why did Parliament take so long to appoint the board?
Well, to say this process was hustled through the Portfolio Committee is really an understatement. It was way back in 13th of June this year that the Minister apparently wrote to the committee and reminded them about the impending expiry of the board's term of office. Now, I say apparently because I've only been a member for a few weeks, so I have no idea why the Minister was involved and why the committee would wait until a letter arrived to begin preparations, because after all, they do oversight over the Minister, not the other way around. And nearly 3 months later, after that letter arrived on the 6th of September, the subcommittee was created to go through the process. The next day, 120 candidate CVs came to me. The shortlisting of 37 out of the 120 was done on the morning after that. It was run past our caucuses, adopted a few hours later, and the interviews began on the Tuesday. So done at record speed, a process that they were fully aware needed to be done from the moment they appointed the previous board. They knew exactly the day it would be dissolved, as it were. So it expired on Saturday, no replacement in sight, and we did have a meeting for deliberations on the outcome of the interviews. That was on the 26th of September, a full week after we completed the interviews, and we were only then made aware of the delays in the vetting. Now, I have ascertained, I also have a foot still in the JSCI. The SSA have apparently done their part, but the SAP system has been down. I checked again today. It's still down, so no criminal record checks can apparently be done, and now we sit. So it seems the entire process has been stalled by the SAPs. But I do believe the committee should obviously have factored in the possibility and begun the process months and months earlier than
because Diane, that is the issue. We know as far back as 2019, when Ayanda Dlodlo was still the Minister of the State Security Agency, and she told Scopa that we have a huge backlog that we're dealing with. So surely that should have been something that is factored in.
Absolutely, it should have been. I mean, everybody knows that there's a huge issue with vetting backlogs. Look, this is not top secret security clearance. It's a very basic clearance. And I don't think it would take the State Security Agency any time at all to complete it. But without the certificate saying there's no criminal record attached to that ID number, you have a problem.
Aubrey, what do you make of this?
Well, it's indeed a very sad moment for SABC not to have a board. I mean, accountability is everything. And to have such an institution to go without a board, it's a serious concern. You can hear what Diane is saying around the processes of Parliament. But we also put the blame squarely lies on Parliament Portfolio Committee and the State Security Agency. I mean, there was a time, but it's a debate for another day. There was a time when they took the State Security Agency outside Ayanda Dlodlo's space and say to the President, we still find ourselves unable to vet a mere 37 people. And you can imagine what crisis we're facing.
And for me, all of this is also happening as there is a deadlock in wage salary negotiations.
Absolutely. The outgoing board, actually, you've asked a question earlier on, is it a good story to tell? Absolutely no. We want to argue that differently. And we have a board that is leaving SABC that will have a legacy, amongst others, of having a series of strikes at SABC, of having retrenchment after retrenchment, re-employing the very same people. The board that claimed that it will save 3 billion rands to dismiss workers. By now, we should have set at 6 billion.
Where was that claim made?
Remember, during the retrenchment, Section 189, they said one of the reasons they have to cut the salary, and they will have about this amount that they will save from the salaries. But that did not happen.
Okay, Bongumusa, was it really 3 billion?
That's entirely not true. The amount of money that we were meant to save was 700 million, and the 700 million was going to come firstly from retrenchment, but also there's going to be a review of the leave policy. There was going to be a number of other interventions that needed to be done, for example, freeze of salary increases, and all of that together was going to give us a 700 million saving.
So not 3 billion. Okay, Aubrey?
No, that's not true.
Where did you, because I looked for that 3 billion as well, I can't find it.
Remember, we have Section 189, where they present in the meeting that we meet. Amongst others, it's correct to say one of those was a leave process. But they tell us now recently that no, some of the executive cash on the leave process also told that the leave process will be, actually workers at SABC has to give that up. But they themselves offered themselves, 20% salary increase. Then they say, no, it's just leave cash on, which will stay there as a part of your salary. Those are some of the things. We can go back and forth. But those
which is something that the board is also denying. But we'll deal with that when we come back. Also asking you this evening, do you think that the outgoing SABC board has a good story to tell, and looking at the state of the public broadcaster? And welcome back as we look at the tenure of the outgoing board of the SABC. Their tenure came to an end on Saturday, and as it currently stands, the SABC is boardless. Bongumusa Makatini is the former chairperson of the SABC. Bongumusa, let's start off that conversation around the 20% salary increase or bonuses that were paid out. The board has denied this.
Thank you for that opportunity. The truth of the matter is the board is directly responsible for the appointment of the group CEO, CFO, and the COO. So at that level, there hasn't been any increase. The board that I was chairing has never had a review of the board fees since we took office. So it's entirely not true. The explanation that was provided in Parliament when we appeared before the Portfolio Committee by the Group CEO, Madoda Ngcabwe, he explained the increases that relate to, for example, the head of legal, because there was a consolidation of a number of departments that is now responsible for. That's as an outcome of the restructuring. He also explained the commission linked to, I think, Reggie Ngumalo, that it has to do with the sales package, the sales employees packages that gets paid to those. But those kind of detail are not at the board level, but they are at an executive level. That's the explanation that Madoda provided to Parliament.
Okay, let me quickly then ask you, are you proud of the financial state that you're leaving the SABC behind with, and also considering the opinion from the Auditor General?
The truth of the matter that I'm sure South Africans won't forget is the state at which we found the SABC. And we've been able, working tirelessly with the executive team, to reduce the losses of the SABC from over R1 billion. Today we're sitting at about 200 million. And anyone who bears to consider the ad hoc committee report that was done, the public protector as a report that was produced, as well as the forensic investigations that were done, you will know we inherited a situation that was dire. And with all of that, we've been able to stabilize the organization from a governance point of view, from a leadership point of view. And this is why today we talk of an SABC that is stable. Of course, there's still a lot that needs to be done from a finance stabilization point of view or viability point of view. I've touched on the unfunded mandate, which costs SABC about 1.6, 1.7 billion rands a year. And that remains an area that needs to be addressed. And we've made a number of submissions and recommendations to address that particular issue.
Yeah, but would you say that you're proud of the financial state that you're leaving the SABC behind with?
We are proud of what we've been able to achieve, Adrian, but of course there's still a lot more that needs to be done. Okay. If you look at what we were able to do, we've been able to deal with cost decisively. We've been able to come up with new revenue streams that were not there before our time. Yeah. We've been able to bring in competent and experienced executives to lead the organization. Today we have an SABC that has been able to run 2 elections successfully. It was highly praised by the independent bodies in terms of its independence and the ability in which we managed to allow everyone to have an opportunity to express a view. So SABC is in a better state than the state we inherited. Okay.
Diane, do you agree with Bongo Musa that the SABC is in a better state?
I absolutely don't, I'm afraid. I knew many of the people who were told, we're going to treble your workload and halve your salary. Would you like to stay on? It was a form of constructive dismissal, frankly. And in the annual report, it states very clearly that there have been massive increases. I've already put the questions through to the minister. Kindly lay out if these are monthly increases or what the situation is in terms of the salaries that are under question. There was huge explanations which sounded like a big smokescreen, which were given when they came before us a week or so ago. So these are questions that still have to be answered, pinned down. I initially believed, for example, that the National Assembly had the power to instruct the president to appoint an interim board, but in terms of the legislation, it actually says it can only be appointed if the board is dissolved. And of course, it has not been. It has come to the end of its term. There is nothing in the legislation that says if the committee fails in its job to come up with a new board, what happens? There is absolute blank there. So we meet again at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I had hoped the chair would provide some sort of clarity on the matter, but having received the agenda, there's no mention of it. Obviously, I will raise it. But we are left with the situation. I mean, nobody's referred to the 2.8 billion in irregular, fruitless and wasteful expenditure and zero action taken against those who were behind that kind of catastrophe. Yes, there's a net loss of 201 million and that has come down, but there are also lawsuits against the SABC. There are, someone gave the security contracts of 185 million, not to the person who won the process, but to someone else. There are huge issues that the Auditor General has been asking and that all need answers.
Yeah, and Bongo Musa, it would seem that even the minister is not happy with the board, considering the letter that she had written to you, that you are failing to meet the deadline around the funds of the SABC and how to improve the revenue of the SABC. City Press article saying that the minister even threatened to declare the board delinquent.
Maybe let me clarify something, Adrian, if you allow me. The 2.8 billion rand dates back to 2011. That's before our time as this board. And that was explained thoroughly. Even when you go through the Auditor General report, it's clearly stated that it's an opening balance from 2011. And that was explained, and it's true. It's like that. In terms of the minister declaring a board a delinquent, it's a court process according to the Companies Act.
Yeah.
And the minister did not say she was going to declare us delinquent because she doesn't have those powers. It's a court process. What the minister was unhappy with, she had requested that we submit a revenue improvement plan, which we had missed the deadline of June because the board actually did ask management to work on what I refer to as a critical path, to look at what can be done to help the SABC get out of the dire financial or revenue losses situation, which emanated from COVID-19 challenges. The truth of the matter is a lot of organizations in this country and everywhere else in the world went through a difficult time. We depend on revenue that gets generated from advertising. 80% of SABC's revenue comes from advertising. Yeah. So if businesses were not trading for 2 years, surely that will have an impact. For people to expect SABC not to suffer as a result of what the globe went through, it's unreasonable and unfair.
Yeah, but our revenues actually increased, did it not? From advertising.
The revenue has increased year on year. That's correct. The revenue has increased year on year. But the truth of the matter is we would have wanted to live in SABC that is profitable. And we haven't been able to achieve that. And for a number of reasons, I've touched on the impact of COVID, but also I've touched on the intense competition that we find ourselves in. The truth of the matter is SABC has quite a lot to cover from a public mandate, which I've indicated that it costs the SABC about 1.6 billion rand. We only get 3% basically support from government. That's the only money we get from government. So 80%, we have to go out there and compete with everyone.
So do you have a revenue improvement plan? Is it there now?
Yes, we did meet the deadline that the minister subsequently allowed us to submit by the 5th of October. We did meet that deadline and we've submitted.
Okay. When we come back, we continue our conversation focusing on the tenure of the outgoing board and also hearing from Labour about what their take is on the board. We'd love to hear your opinion as well. Remember, you can tweet at Unfiltered SABC or you can go onto our Facebook page and just search for Unfiltered SABC. And welcome back as we look at the tenure of the outgoing SABC board. Aubrey Shabalala is representing the Communications Workers Union. Aubrey, your take on the board. You spoke about it a bit earlier on, touched a bit on it, but also some of the other issues that haven't been dealt with as yet.
Well, adding on the issues around the board, one of them is that when you create artificial profit and you indicate it as success, that is actually misleading.
What do you mean by that?
You know that SABC have cut numbers of staff. 2, you know that SABC has been selling its properties like nobody cares. 3, you know that SABC board, when it came in, it promised to create new revenue streams, which it failed up until this point. That's why we are sitting with a crisis of revenue. We have not changed the issue of the licensing model. Remember, one of the requirements, not requirements, but our approach when we said we need a bailout was that we are going to buy new content. And tell me if you look around at SABC comparatively to that money that have been given. I mean, recently, the poor couldn't even watch Comrades Marathon, amongst other things. It's the first time it happens. There was a time that was where the minister had to intervene on the issue of a PSL not being broadcasted by the SABC. That is the job of the board that must do. So if you collectively look at all those areas, it will show you that as a public broadcaster that has to provide this content to the poor of the poor who don't have access to a paid channels, they've lost a lot of margin. But coming back to the issues of workers themselves, 3 years without a salary increasement, cut off job, double up their hours of work and all of those things. That is a clear indication of instability from what they promised when they came in. And it concludes what they talk about a good politician when he says, this is what I'll do for you when you vote for them. And when they finish their term, they tell you why they did not manage to do those things. So that's typical the SABC board.
Okay, and Diane, from your end, in closing remarks as well?
Look, I think there are major issues. After the Section 194 process, that we were told it was going to see a huge drop in the amount of money spent on salaries. In fact, payments to employees went up by 3% to 2.2 billion rand. Now, really, they're now advertising for hundreds of people to fill in the posts that they just emptied. There are still huge issues. I don't think that process was handled well at all. I don't think the process of getting rid of the head of news was handled well. There were many stumbling blocks, I think, that they fell at. Yeah. And I shudder to think what's going to be left of the SABC once the committee finally gets its act together and gets a board put in. We're supposed to sit now for months waiting on the SAPS and State Security Agency to finally get a board together. This process should have started in February or March. Yeah. So yes, I accept absolutely the committee is to blame, and they are now completely rudderless, and the executive can do exactly what it wants.
Bongumusa, do you think that the board could have handled the dismissal of Patiswa a bit better in hindsight?
Maybe there's a question I didn't answer. There's a concern that's been raised by Ms. Cole-Barnett about the security tender. That security tender was awarded before this board's term. Yeah. And it's only fair that we report things correctly. It was not done by my board. It was done before this board. Yes, it's showing now as a material irregularity because we had to pay for that security service because we're a national key point. By the way, that tender has come to an end and a new company has been appointed correctly. Yeah, I do want to touch on
sorry, just quickly on the security tender. The Auditor General, there's the report that's out. There's the SIU report out as well. Who has been held accountable?
What had happened is when we took over as a new board and there were questions about the security tender, I basically, as the chair working with my board, invited SIU to investigate what had transpired. And we've been working with the SIU to basically follow up what has happened, but it was before this board's term. And there are steps that are being taken. If you've read what the report that was produced by the SIU, there are court processes, litigation between the SIU and the interim board that was responsible at the time. The matter is in court as we speak.
But has anyone been held accountable? Because remember that's a promise that the board has made, even to the Auditor General, and in this financial report, nothing has happened.
Nothing.
Like I'm saying, sir, that the matter is in court. So we, as the board of the SABC, we have to act within the law. So when the matter is in court, what can you do outside of the litigation process? You can't just go declare people delinquent without a court finding them to be delinquent. Because this was a board matter, so it is handled by the court. And we're waiting for the outcome, and the SIU is involved, and everybody knows where that matter is.
And just quickly on the Patiswa matter, because we're running out of time, I'm sorry, Bongumusa, but do you think that the board could have handled it better? In a couple of seconds, please.
The Patiswa matter is not at the board level. Patiswa did not report to the board. She reported to the group CEO. So it was handled at the level below the board.
But do you think that it could have been handled better?
That would be interfering on the operational decision that were taken by the executive team. But as a board, whatever that required the board to do, the board processes it. But the issue of the head of news belongs to the executive level, not the board.
Bongumusa Makatini, former chairperson of the SABC Board, also Diane Cole-Barnett, member of the Democratic Alliance, and also the Shadow Minister of Communication, and Aubrey Shabalala, who is the General Secretary of the Communication Workers Union. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Aldrin Simpier. See you again next week, same time, same place, right here on S3.